Hello and welcome to Have You Got Your Shit Together with me, Caitlin Orion, the podcast that celebrates not having your shit together. On today's episode, we have the Repeat Beat poet, also known as PJ. He's a hip-hop poet and broadcaster, fusing traditional poetics and hip-hop culture to capture and extend moments of time, thought and feeling. PJ has performed across the UK and internationally at venues including the Southbank Centre, performing alongside writers like Margaret Atwood. He co-founded the hip-hop open mic night Pen-Ting, created the spoken word radio show The Repeat Beat Podcast, and hosts the multi-award nominated Lunar Poetry Podcast. His brilliant debut pamphlet, A Testament to Life and Death, contains poems that function as blessings, memorials, prophecies, and survivors' guides for soldiering through modern life while being black in Britain. Here's the Repeat Beat poet. So, hey, PJ.
Ciao, ciao. How you doing?
Ciao. I'm okay, how are you?
Indeedy. Living large, struggling.
Living large and struggling. Not living, laughing, loving then. It's a different...
Definitely not live, laugh, love, no. I need vitamin water.
Okay.
I need lemon slices.
Wow.
Honey.
Is this your rider?
Yeah.
Is this what you say to most people when you're doing spoken word night?
Be like, look, right, if it's not in the dressing room an hour before I have to go on stage, I'm not doing the gig.
Yeah, fair fucks. Fair fucks.
Shameful. Never me. I'm far too used to doing pubs and like downstairs rooms in theatres and cafes.
But I think you have to hold yourself to a high standard. So even in a pub, if you have a bit of a rider, then you're raising people's standards, babes.
2 drinks in it, you know what I mean? Like, come on, please.
Hey.
Ciao. Hey.
Hey. On a scale of shit to together, how are you feeling today?
I would say shit, maybe 40% shit, 60% together.
40% shit?
Yeah, 60% together. So
okay.
like I'm doing like just better than like, you know, half,
Okay.
just better than halfway.
Why do you think that is?
Because although I feel like stressed and I'm kind of like, you know, very like cast adrift,
Yeah.
I can see the direction. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can see the direction. So like I take solace in that and I'm going to hang on to that like the tiny piece of driftwood taking me down.
And you just started a new job today?
No, it was about like 3 weeks ago. 3.5 weeks ago.
But you're still acclimatising.
Indeedy, I am, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a different world, the old 9 to 5.
Yes.
While also keeping everything else on.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that then, what does having your shit together mean to you? What does that look like for you?
I think it's about like alignment. You know what I mean? Like, it's a bit hard to quantify because it's something that's like experiential. Do you know what I mean? Like it's something that you feel as a like a state, you know, over like a set period of time or in a certain way, or, you know, everyone flicks back to the times in their lives where they were like, oh, it was all going for me, you know, like they're like, you know, you like click to yourself and you're walking down the street and it's like you're in a film. Or
do you think you realise when you're in that state then?
Yes, sometimes, but more often than not upon reflection. You know, more often than not it's the story of like, oh, when I look back at that, everything felt a certain way, everything felt right, you know, everything felt great. And then I think that happens a lot. And so I look for that. Like, I look for like the moments where I think I've actually been like, you know, I've had my shit together. This was sick. This was great. Do you remember when I did this? And like, I don't do reflection very well. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I really have to like think about it when I do.
Yeah.
And so when you ask that, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what's going on in my head right now. So
it's things feeling like they're clicking. So like, how does that manifest? What sort of stuff is clicking?
Like purpose and like interests and like just to be like concrete in it. It's like for once I might have a bit of like financial security that I haven't, that's not been, you know, in my line of work as a poet and broadcaster and general all-purpose garden variety.
You really are a
creative,
multifaceted creative person. When I was reading up about you before this, you've got your finger in many pies.
Yeah, like it all just became part of the same expression. And so it was very easy to like move from one thing to another constantly. And I've always been like that since a kid, you know.
What, is that like an interest in like people and like the human experience, I guess?
Yeah, but also just like in like crowd and like mass, like
Yeah.
popular, like listen, I love the idea of like choirs and teams and just community and like, you know, the idea of like the summation of human experience, our capacity to do anything and everything, be it like shockingly awful or like absolutely terrific and wonderful. That's very interesting to me. And then also like just, you know, wanting to express myself and figure out what I wanted to say. And that was through like music. I was playing music like in church, then in like indie bands. That was like all sort of secondary school, then like orchestras at school and stuff. And then, but I was playing music in church like
Were you playing instruments?
Yeah.
What instruments?
So I was playing rhythm guitar, like bass guitar a couple times, drums more often than not, maybe like a couple years, keyboards, I'm not sure if I said that.
No.
It's like I was doing backing singing
One-man
at
band?
times as well. Yeah, like just a music nerd, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like I was doing music school as well on like a Wednesday afternoon, and so on a like free session in that, everyone would just be sitting in the whatever canteen, like Star Wars, and I was in the canteen and just throwing around instruments and being like, oh, teach me how to play a tune on the, I don't know, oboe, like, learn how to get stuff out of a trumpet. Like I can't play like brass, but I can get like a tune and a half.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Natural talent.
Nah, it's a family thing.
Yeah.
Like it's family, innit? It's family
Really?
inheritance. Yeah. Like my grandfather on my father's side was a preacher, and then so
Like
that's
orator. That's
proper. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's really fun. And then my basically like the man who raised my mother and many other people alongside a wonderful woman who we referred to as mother. He was like a great fan of like music, and he had a piano in his like house, and he would always play it and stuff. And yeah, there's a crazy story I heard about my family a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Is that when Nina Simone was living in Ghana for a couple of weeks, she was like on tour when she was around, living in Liberia. This is like, I forget the exact time period, but it's a period of her career. She was hosted by my family not once but twice in Elmina.
No way.
Yeah, and like just somebody in the family group chat just dropped the picture. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh, by the
That's
way,
mad.
this is Nina Simone and your like great uncle.
No way. Wow. So it's very much in the bloodstream.
Like more so than I have
Nina
ever
Simone
realised.
is in that bloodstream somewhere.
Yeah, but these realizations sort of like
Yeah.
constantly happen. There's a line that I forget I stole from somebody that says like, there is a point where your inheritances become your discoveries.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like the things that you sort of feel like are your, like I have a sort of right to this, or like this is me. You start to discover them for yourself as opposed to like whatever they are meant to be in the abstract, and let's say whatever else it means for the rest of your family, for instance.
Yeah.
But for you, it might mean this, or however you grow up, things like that.
Wow.
And so, yeah, like music definitely feels like an inheritance that is becoming all the time a discovery, more so than poetry.
Really?
Poetry and lyrics, I was like, look, I can
Into
just,
the lyric side of it.
yeah, I can just talk in it. So like, I love it, like, but also I have to be careful because it's about being interested in conversation.
Yeah.
That's where all my journalistic interest comes from.
Yeah.
Stories, conversations.
Yeah.
That was the thing you mentioned before, the human experience and all of that malarkey.
So how did you get into poetry then?
It was open mics at uni, first year of uni.
Yeah.
So the full story is that I was, like always doing, writing lyrics and stuff. But I, was always doing them with
Little
music.
indie boy.
Honestly, Block Party covers, Franz Ferdinand covers,
Love
Arctic
that.
Monkeys, Fratellis. There's lots of. I mean, if I drop the name of the band, the few people who will listen to this will go and look up like the band that exists. And I won't say it because it's embarrassing stuff. But we had a couple of great songs. I was in a 2-man punk band called William Devine and the 789s.
Wow.
We made like big, stupid, simple 3-chord rock and roll songs for like really gritty. Recorded it in a big old converted caravan in like Colchester somewhere.
Love that.
But yeah, so I won't drop the name of the band. But yeah, I was always doing like lyrics and writing and stuff. And then I took a year in between leaving school and going to uni because I wanted to be a journalist, and so I was just writing reviews and stuff. But I was also always just writing little verses, little poems. some really close friends will remember me just kind of wistfully sitting in a park with a notepad writing some poems in that summer. And then I started to share them. And then uni, first open mic night, forget what you heard about spoken word, which was in Stoke Newington, a bar called Ryan's. Absolutely wonderful night, hosted by Rick the Most, who was also an Essex boy, now going by they, them. They have gone through a transition and it's wonderful. Love that for them. When I did them, that's how I was introduced to them. Apologies. And Matt Cummins as well, two phenomenal poets. And just the motion of energy when all these poets would come in this room meant that every week you were bringing a new thing. You were trying to like, you know, you were competing in like a friendly way with yourself, really. Because that, you know,
just raising each other's standards, I guess.
Exactly. And also just having fun with it, man. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that line you said was nuts. That made me write a thing like this.
Oh, no way.
Or the way you did that. And like, many of the people who I was blessed to be in a poetry community with, they were like really about their, can I swear on this?
Yeah.
They were really about their shit. You know what I mean? They were on their shit. They were serious. They were also dedicated, but they were also like just trying to be good people and trying to be kind. And the whole stereotype of an open mic being very like earnest and everyone, no one's properly criticizing anybody else. You know what I mean? It's very much like a place to, you know, we appreciate everybody that gets on stage because not to diminish it at all, that is a massive act. It's a huge thing. And so seeing people who are respecting that, but then also respecting the craft of like trying to, you know, write the closest thing to their lives or their feelings or a story or just an experience. Great writers that are now, you know, everything from writing obviously like TV and theatre and like still poetry and like internationally musicians, so many of them, and everybody is still doing poetry in one way or another. And so I got that bug and then just kept on hitting nights. There were many, many other nights, and if I start to list them all, then I probably will be here for a long while. I think I do list some of them in the back of my book, actually, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I did. Ooh. No, I said thank you to everybody who's ever booked me. So that, because I couldn't be bothered to write.
Okay, so before this, I asked you to prepare an object that makes you feel like you've got your shit together.
Yes.
Do you know what that is?
Yeah, that is currently, and at different times it's different things, but because it was the thing I always have in my bag, it is my diary.
Okay.
And it's
a beautiful black leather.
Yeah, black leather moleskin sort of like design, but with a, imagine a sort of a duck or swan looking bird, fully curved, basically apart from like a tiny, like, you know, gap on the right hand side.
Very sexy.
I mean, well, it's...
Not the duck, but the sleekness of the book.
The sleekness of the book. I appreciate it. Look, it's matte and it's very cool. Yeah, and it's like it's this brand called Boko, and they make essentially like books, but with Adinkra symbols as these like wonderfully embossed, like, you know, into the design, and it's just like Adinkra are kind of like, to put it absolutely super crudely, they're sort of like a West African language, almost like a hieroglyphic like language. It's like pictorial language. And so every like symbol has like a story and a meaning. Yeah, indeed. And this is like a sort of a bird looking back on itself. And the symbol is Sankofa.
Okay.
And so that means like go back and get it, or like, you know, take from the past and go forward, or like, you know, go back to go forward. It's that kind of sentiment. And because the company, they completely add little cards explaining the images and what it means, and also add pronunciations and stuff.
That's amazing. A symbol of learning from the past. So I've just been passed a card. This symbol is of a mythical bird with its feet planting forward and its head turned backwards to retrieve its precious egg. It represents the importance of learning from one's past in order to make positive progress in one's future. I love that. That is so cool.
And they're not even sponsoring me to plug this. But genuinely, I have like a whole collection of these, and this is like my day-to-day diary.
And do you write in it often?
Yeah,
you keep like a daily journal, or is it like a morning pages vibe where it's just empty and out, or is it like more to remember the things that you've done?
It's been a bunch of things at different times, but mostly it's just like, you know, your standard 5-minute journal type things. But then I will just, if I'm, you know, if I'm doing something else, I might just write a chunk of text in it. But it's just my day-to-day diary. And I have a series of these now, and I'm building them up, and it feels kind of nice, especially because they're nice little leather-bound.
They're lovely.
Books. So that's the thing that makes me feel like I got my shit together, because if I can trace my days and see progression and reflect on things quite literally how I was feeling at the time or what I was doing, then it just makes me feel like I'm in control of my narrative a bit.
Yeah.
Because
I definitely feel a lack of that when, like, sometimes when I'm feeling really out of control with my life, I'll realise it's because I've not been stopping to, like, keep track of what I've been doing. And so, like, days can just run by and I kind of can't even remember what's just happened because I've not taken a moment to not reflect necessarily, but just kind of sit with yourself and, like, gather yourself a bit, you know?
There's something about actually having the time to do that as well. And, like, especially in major metropolitan cities, London being like, a specifically horrific example.
Run.
Yeah.
Yeah, mad. I love that though. How long have you kept a journal for?
Maybe since I was like, in ways, since I was maybe like 10, 11. But obviously, like, you have a journal, then don't write in it for like 6-7 months, But I suppose for the last like 5-6 years, more often than not, I've had a journaling practice or like a free write practice, or like just having some habit of writing a tiny bit every day.
Yeah. I
mean, even when things like NaPoWriMo like come round, which is National Poetry Writing Month, I'll try. I'll get like maybe 4 or 5 across a month.
I think I've
done
one.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that. That's very cool. So, can you tell me about a time in your life where you felt like you really had your shit together?
A time in my life where I had my shit together. I had a big old think about this on the train over here. I did. And I also thought about it earlier in the conversation. And I think the time when I felt I had my shit most together, my 25th birthday.
Wow.
It was, I was in Amsterdam doing a couple of shows with Imaginary Millions, who are like a live hip-hop, funk, free poetry jam. Like so many, it's just about expression and like bringing who you are, improvised music. It's an improvised music jam with poetry.
Wow.
And we were doing that on the first Sunday of the month at the book club in Shoreditch for like, maybe like 3 years old. And we went out to do these shows in Amsterdam. And just so happened it was my birthday on like the day of the show. And so we did a show the night before and I was on the rooftop of like a hotel like bar sort of thing with a venue on the other side, which is where we were playing. Did the gig, was out looking at the sunset, just enjoying just the kind of, when sunset literally like streaks through the sky and you can see the haze of it. Enjoying that. And then the day after, did this show on kind of like a huge like sort of secured barge, north side of Amsterdam. And, there's maybe like 150, 200 people at the start. And then by the end of it, maybe like 300, 400 people, because people were like on the banks on the side. And we were doing like, just like improvised jams, but going back to like standards and classics. And I was with my friends and like we were, there are moments where we looked at each other and we were like, this is really happening, but we're really doing this. I recorded the whole thing on my phone, literally in my pocket. So I, during downtimes I would listen back to that. But I feel like I had my shit together because I was doing what I loved with people who I cared for and respected. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't getting entirely remunerated, but hey, look, flights paid, everything paid, and come on, like, basically I was just starting
experience,
out. And genuinely, the value, this is the important thing, not monetary is not the only way to value these things. And, Imaginary Millions is one of the most valuable communities and experiences consistently that I've had across my like development, especially in the last like 5, 6, 7 years, compared to like early on, that was more like the beat poets and things like that. But all of this Imaginary Millions, the moment of it was so together, and I was just free to wander around Amsterdam with a friend, listen to great music and eat great food, enjoy just the nature and the canals. And it was maybe like my fourth or third time there, something like that. But I just had a really good time.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had my shit together because even when shit was going left, as it did, we missed the train out there. We missed the Eurostar out there by like 20 minutes, like the gate closed. And so, you know, people around us in the queue, me and my friend are just in the queue there, just chilling. And people are freaking out. And like, you know, this group of like 5-6 lads who are on trying to get on a stag do, they get their passports taken. They don't even realise, like, some lady over here is breaking down fully, going on the tears, and they're not buying it.
Oh my God.
It was chaos, but we kind of just like kept our cool and just chilled there because we spoke relatively nicely to the person on the counter. Yeah. We got a first class upgrade to Brussels, and then so we had to wait like an hour. I got a first class upgrade to Brussels, and then got in basically about an hour after we would have done anyway because we spent time. And it was like, look, I could have panicked then, you know. I could have been like, and not only could I often am just freaking out and being like, oh my God, this is absolutely screwed. I can't believe it. This is terrible. How have you done this again? And, you know, like that
the self-hate voice. Yeah.
Exactly. But this time I had a good friend with me, and bless him, he is just one of these people who will talk to everyone and make friends all the time, constantly. And I was not in that place. But I'm so glad he was. Yeah. And so, and you know, it was on my birthday. And at the same time, Stormzy, who is about my age, was also having his birthday, and he was playing Glastonbury, right? And like, exactly. And like, I love Stormzy. But the moment that was so important was that afterwards, my mum called me and she was like, have you seen the Stormzy like set at Glastonbury? It's really good. I'm like, my mum is telling me about Stormzy, and I'm like, I absolutely love that because she's got great music taste, right? And she was like, oh, you're really similar. She was saying that.
Oh my God.
And she knows that
That's
I've
so
like,
sweet.
Yeah, there's Stormzy songs that like get me. Blinded by Your Grace. The fact that he called his album Gang Signs and Prayer, like I love to see that similar blurring of religion and faith and lots of stuff that we had the piss taken out of us as dark-skinned black African boys in the early 2000s and 90s, like especially like church things, you know, especially exuberant celebrations. Yeah. Meanwhile, Stormzy's banging it out, literally.
Yeah.
And I was like, look,
everyone's singing along.
Not only singing along, he shouted out, like, you know, in the middle he does like a 3-4 minute shout where he shouts out everyone, and it's like everyone's coming with me. Yeah, everybody. That
is amazing.
So yeah, I felt like I had my shit together.
Things were aligning.
Moment. Many things were aligning. It weren't all great, but in that 3 days, 4 days,
love that.
Chef's kiss.
Because that just sounds like, I don't know, it's the alignment of like career and friends and family and like cultural as well, almost, that those things were all just coming into place at the same time for you.
Yeah, and finding my place in it, you know? Yeah. Like, I was spitting rhymes that I'd written and was freestyling.
Amazing.
And I had like a repertoire, but also I was growing and I could feel myself like breaking new ground and things. Yeah. And I was being supported, you know, like really, and I felt supported. Yeah. And Imagine Millions was like church. I'm talking a lot about how I am, yeah. I mean, it's very important to me.
Yeah, clearly means a lot to you.
Yeah, I love it. We have a live album that you can... Well, we have 2 live albums, in fact. One of them's on Spotify. It's called Together in the Room. And then the other album is called Spending Our Fortune. That's on Bandcamp. That was an International Women's Day special. Wow. Exactly. All-femme band. It was absolutely sick.
So you were doing poetry with that?
Yeah, poetry and emceeing.
Oh my God, amazing.
Yeah. It was really fun. So the poem that I have called The Faithful has taken many like different forms, but the form it took on the Imagine Millions album Together in the Room is almost it does so many of the things I love about the poem really well on a huge scale. So the concept of this gig and this album recording was a full sort of like hour and a bit, fully improvised. There's like, you know, I think a 7-piece band, maybe like 10, 11 different vocalists, be they singers, MCs, poets, and everyone's quite literally like in a circle, in a massive circle, and like you stand up and then you do your thing. And so, we did this. And obviously there's poems and pieces that each of the artists might have had.
Yeah.
But when you do them in this context, they take on a new... Completely.
It like transcends the poetry, doesn't it?
Yeah, it gives it a different vehicle.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And poetry is a fundamental thing in so many other great parts of what we would call, the expressive cultural arts. Like, and I think poetry's always been quite like fundamental, and especially like the open mic scene, you can see it in just like the weightings of things. Yeah. Poetry books don't sell, poetry open mics are hard to keep going. Like people say you start doing open mics and then you move on to other things. But there's a reason why it's always there. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's also just a vanishingly small amount, especially in Europe, especially in England specifically, a vanishingly small amount of people can actually have access to like, the respect and the platitudes and all of the grandeur that comes with the like 0.005% of like people who can make a living out of poetry.
Oh, completely.
And only poetry. Lots of other people do lots of other things, and that's also not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, but it does mean that poetry tends to get disrespected, and I like to put poetry front and center. That's why I call myself the repeat beat poet.
So where did that come from?
The story behind that is, so beat poets, your Jack Kerouacs and your Ginsbergs and On the Road, and I absolutely loved it. Like the idea, the idealism, and don't get me wrong, I didn't idolize these people. They are not good people. Do you know what I mean? They're not an example of how to live life. But I was enraptured by it and the way they wrote, the kind of free expression.
Also, like the cohort, I guess, of that kind of poetry being at the forefront of a thing, Yeah,
and there was like a full gang of them, do you know what I mean? Like a full crew. And as I started to learn more about them, I started to learn about different poets who didn't get like the shine at the time. Yeah. So like Ted Jones was like an American beat poet, and he wrote about jazz fantastically, and I found him a couple of years ago. And then like Deanne DePrima, who was like a proper, I use these like air quotes, proper radical. My point is that she wrote phenomenally directly to power. Like people say, speak truth to power. She was speaking truth about power, to power, with power. Wow. Do you know what I mean? She was like, and is phenomenal. And I found these other poets. I'm like, oh, okay, so, just beyond the beat poets that we know, there is more. So I was like, right, what do I love? Hip hop, MCing, rhymes, the art of rhyme. Yeah. Love it. And always had done. And so I thought, what about hip hop can I tag to a beat poet? And I came to the concept of a DJ getting a break beat, a 4-bar loop, the Amen break, something like that spawned entire genres and the foundations of, music and everything, and just famous break beats. And I thought, okay, so a DJ repeats a beat, like, you repeat a loop. And then I was like, right, that has a ring to it. Repeat beat, repeat.
That's
beat.
Amazing.
Poet.
I love that.
Yeah, I did come up with a name, and then I was like, well, I just have to do this now.
You really have to commit.
Name's too good. Name's too good to go and miss.
That is so good. Okay, then in opposition to that, a time in your life where you felt like you didn't have your shit together.
Oh, wow. How honest do I want to be on this podcast? Lots of times. But okay, so I'll go with second year of third year of uni, exam time, pre-dissertation time.
Final year.
Yeah, final year.
Yeah.
I was just like I was, essentially I had like a mini stress episode, like a depressive episode brought on by stress induced. And it was maybe like 4 days of feeling entirely like I wasn't really in control of anything that was like happening around me, or just not feeling a part of my life. I felt phenomenally distant, very like
disassociated almost. Yeah. And
in that, but of course the thing that was hanging on was just like this awful, like, self-hate narrative, like just the questioning and all of that negative stuff that you work on in time, but in the moment it's dark, and it's a really hideous like place to be. And I, just felt like I had no control of anything. I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. And so, that was maybe like 4 days, and, we come out the other side still breathing, but I, as the song goes, got by with a little help from my friends and my family.
Yeah.
That was a time when I did not have my shit together one bit.
Was that because there was a part of you that was like, you weren't knowing what you were coming out of uni to, or like the uncertainty of that, or was it like it was the exams and the intense pressure of that?
Nah, it was a massive crisis of self-confidence and
Really?
worth. Do you know what I mean? I was like, it started, and it, because it kind of built up, and like there had been, you know, I've had my issues and struggles, and we all constantly do with mental health and our mental health and mental illness.
Yeah.
These are things that happen. But what happened is that at this time, it was a very small thing, but then the cycle wouldn't stop. Do you know what I mean? Like the thought process wouldn't stop. And I'm like prone to that, especially when I'm like super stressed.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, you know, it was brought on by like essay, like stress, and then like not being able to just control myself to just sit down and like, you know, concentration, things like this. But then also, you know, the feeling of I don't really know what I'm going to be doing. I knew what I wanted to do and what I came to uni to do, which is to meet cool people and do art and then find a career through that, which I did. Yeah. And, you know, I was working at a cinema as well. Like I had stuff going. But in that moment, I wasn't working at the cinema when I was studying. That came later. But in that moment, I was like, don't know what I'm going to be doing. Whatever. Let me just like vegetate in this bed. Yeah. my friend Kaz Teague. Oh, the wonderful Kaz Teague, a phenomenal poet that I've been pleasured to know for a long while. They have a poem called Bad Days, and in it they have a line where they say, "Some days only the bed will have you," or something like that. And it's like words to that effect. I've butchered it, but
well, you should use that in the future.
I will do, but you know, if I was more prepared, I guess I would have the proper reference.
Oh wow, yeah. So. How do you think? Is that something that you're still prone to, like that kind of self-talk?
Yeah, I mean, look, did you see the winter that we just had in the UK? It lasted about 9 months.
Yeah, hellish.
And in that time, like even though I was like sort of like I was blessed to be traveling in and around and things. You know, another friend of mine said, leaving the UK always feels like a holiday no matter where you're going, and returning always feels like a funeral.
Oh my God, yeah.
And it's like, it's harsh.
It's hard.
And so, yeah, like I say all that to say that this winter was very difficult, and I did really struggle with keeping myself like feeling like mentally like well and like healthy, you know? I think that's like very normal to struggle. But yeah, we each have our burdens to bear.
I think it's so interesting the way that like your literally the way that your voice talks to yourself can colour like neutral situations. Just like you being really cruel with the wording that you use with yourself that you wouldn't use to like your friends or anything like that can just make a small thing that you might get wrong into like this huge disaster, and your self-esteem can be so shook by that, you know?
Yeah, especially when, you know, your work, your professional life is about putting your creative side out there. Yeah. And obviously people judge that. I don't have to tell you that. Yeah, people have opinions. Yes. And they will always have opinions. But if what you feel inside is already negative and then then is reinforced, or there's different ways you feel it is reinforced, then that's really like hard to deal with.
Really difficult. Yeah. I think as well, like one of the things when you were saying about coming up to the exams period, I remember someone saying to me about like, you know, in the past we would have these fight or flight experiences which would manifest as like anxiety, as like it's like a caveman sort of thing where, you know, if there was a line on the horizon you would be anxious and then you'd run away from it. But now like our anxieties are exams or like not knowing what your future is going to be, and that's like this prolonged sustained thing of being in fight or flight, which you know our human psyche isn't really made for that. It's
like the fight, flight or freeze they say now as well. And like I do get it's like that limbic, that proper like very limbic system brain of like really fundamental feeling of like I am like terrified. You know what I mean? Like I'm like absolutely terrified. And you know, social situations is another one. Like, we're terrified of what people think, and because
All the
that's
time.
about being cast out.
Yeah.
And that's like a very like primal
Not
fear.
being
'Cause,
accepted.
yeah, you lose the community, and like, you know, if you go back 40,000, 50,000 years, that's like basically dying because you're just left to the elements and you're alone, you know?
Literally. It's such a dichotomy, isn't it? Because, like, I think that's a word. But because I care so much about what people think of me, and yet have also gone into a career where people can freely judge me. And that the two existing is just a strange choice for someone like me to have made, I think, in that sense. How do
you deal with that?
I dealt with it badly at first, I think, because of like social media and stuff, you were very receptive to what people tag you in and stuff like that. And I think at first I definitely fell into a pattern of almost like searching for it, because it was like a control thing. I was like, if someone's saying something about me out there, whatever it is, I want to know.
Ooh, yeah.
Because I want to be in control of it somehow. But I think having learned the hard way, and also having experienced how fickle it is, I think I'm now able to separate myself from it a bit more. I think that's more in terms of acting. And I think in a way I am more susceptible to people's opinion with acting because I am playing a character, and therefore I feel like I'm being judged on a talent, if that makes sense. With like poetry and writing, I think because it is so from my point of view that I'm quite confident now in it being like, well, it doesn't matter if you don't agree with it. This is me and this is from my point of view. And I think that's how I've separated the two. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I definitely like, bloody hell, like I'll do a poetry night and I'll come off and I'll just be like, oh my God, like, did everyone hate it? You know, I care so much, but I still do. But I think I've just got better at, maybe it's the self-care aspect of it afterwards, and just, you know, also I've like had CBT and stuff like that, and learning the difference between like a fact of a situation and my opinion of a situation, which is kind of what I was saying about like the lens that we put on things. Sometimes I will catch myself and be like, okay, well, is it a fact that this person has just hated what I've done, or is that my opinion because they didn't smile, but maybe they were like paying attention? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, this is like the cognitive part of cognitive behavioural therapy. It's like learning how to essentially train your cognition, and like, you know, what are you seeing? And like, what is that actually? And what is feeling? And it's not to say that feelings aren't real, but it's that you acknowledge a feeling and then you can continue to act in whatever way that you choose, as opposed to being, like, you know, as opposed to being beholden to that.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember when I was in like quite a bad place, and the thing that you were saying about, you know, the way in which we talk about ourselves and that way in self-esteem, like I literally remember I was like writing something in a book, I was taking notes on something, and in my head I was like, oh my God, like your writing is so disgusting. And then I just had this moment where I just like clocked myself, and I was like, God, if I am talking to myself about something as small as that like is inconsequential, like no one cares what my writing looks like, no, you know, that perfectionist element of it, like if that's the micro, like what am I speaking to myself in the macro? In like, you know, on things that matter, like how cruel am I being about things that actually matter?
And we can be so unkind to ourselves. Like the brain is an awful thing sometimes, you know.
And it lies to us like it's not true.
Oh, it's terrifying, isn't it? It's like, come on, I need to like work with me here.
Hey, Ant.
Hey.
You do a great job in editing this podcast, might I say. If people like the podcast, what do they need to do?
Like it.
What else?
Follow it on social media.
And then what?
They could share it with every single person they know.
Thanks, Ant. You can go back to your corner now.
Bye.
3 things that make you feel like shit.
Not being listened to, or like not feeling listened to. Like, so if I feel that I'm trying to do my best to like be calm and explain something like into like super simple time, I'm just trying to like communicate effectively, and someone is just like not like completely like not open to it, not like paying any attention, just completely shuts me down. Makes me feel really annoyed, because I'm just like I'm trying here, and like I'm trying to do this respectfully, as opposed to just being like telling you that you're a dickhead and I'm pissed off. Like, but yeah, so that makes me feel like shit. I think like helplessness, and just generally feeling like helpless. That's another thing that really makes me feel just like that's a particular type of terrible feeling that I have. I'm just like, I feel I can't do anything, or I feel like there's nothing that can be done about this situation. It's almost like despair. And that manifests in like a whole bunch of different ways. So be it like eco and climate anxiety, or be it like, and by the way, that's just anxiety at the world ending.
Yes, I know. Like, and that is like happening.
Yeah.
So when you sit and think about that too much, you just want to...
Yeah, and then, but even on a slightly smaller level, slightly smaller level across my maybe personal life, let's just say like my work.
Yeah.
Like, if I don't feel that I'm in control of it and I'm just like kind of going from place to place, I feel helpless. I feel, so that is another thing. And then third, I would say like loneliness.
Yeah.
I mean, it's awful. Do you know what I mean? Like, for me, personally, in my experience, when I feel my loneliness is when my negative voice happens to be the loudest or is most likely to, like, catch root on something, you know?
Yeah.
Because I have no other, like, input. I'm a very discursive, like, learner, and I love to discuss and, like, figure things out and enjoy things with other people, whether that's verbally or non-verbally.
Yeah,
if we're both just like taking in the same experience, and maybe we talk about it later. I'm like, on a scale of 1 to 10, so give me 3 points about no. So yeah, like, but if it's me, I can do the classic thing because we've all gone through, you know, a general mass shock in the world, which is a huge virus, the coronavirus.
Yeah, and that was like mass isolation.
Yeah. And my regular points of contact in community were regular poetry nights, and like, you know, that's where I saw people.
Yeah.
And so being super isolated, I was also staying in a house that was empty just because the person I was lodging with was out of the country at the time. And so, but I couldn't like change anything. I was very like stuck.
So that's the helpless aspect. You've got all three then.
Do you know what I mean? I was helpless. It was a lonely time. You know,
you weren't being listened to. There's no one to support you.
Listen to my own voice far too much. I was still like, you know, and genuinely, maybe one of the things that kept me going through that time is I was still doing my radio shows.
Yeah.
So people were listening.
You were connecting.
Yeah. I also revived the Lunar Poetry Podcast in that time. So people were listening. Like, and this is why I love radio and podcasting
so much.
Exactly.
We're in the ear.
Exactly. We're with you wherever you're doing. Like,
yeah.
And I start my radio shows with a thing that echoes that. There's a line, and I am doing the thing where I'm going to quote myself.
Absolutely.
Disgusting.
Do it, babes.
Terrifying. So on my radio shows, both Loose Igusi, which is like a Pan-African radio show, basically just black music of all different kinds and varieties, and also the Repeat Beat broadcast, which was a hip hop and poetry show that I did on Threads Radio for like the longest time, like 3.5 years. I do Lucy Goosey every month on the Boat Pod. Episodes are on Mixcloud. Bam. And I also do live shows. But yeah, so there's an intro that I say, and in it is a line where I go, you could be chilling in your kitchen, or you could be cooking in your kitchen or driving in your car. I will still profess this freedom for I and I, sounding a rapturous rallying cry. Yeah. Rallying Cry was a immersive spoken word theatre show that was held at the Battersea Arts Centre by Apples and Snakes.
Yes, yeah.
Who are a great poetry organisation. And the piece I wrote for that was this speech. It was like a character. I was playing a radio DJ.
Love that.
But then like with a lot of complications and difficulties and things like that. And so I took that intro. So I took that piece of writing, turned it into an intro, and now it's almost a central part of who I am when I DJ.
Yeah.
Like I MC and I freestyle, and I might be talking about anything, but I will always have that in there somewhere. Normally at the start, it's like a grounding exercise for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that. So for you, like the way that you dealt with the loneliness is through connection, really, and like creating something to connect people and.
Yeah, focusing on connections and realizing, you know, the social, physical isolation did not have to mean emotional distancing from everything and everyone, you know. And it showed me the things that it reminded me of the things that I genuinely love and found community in and with.
Yeah.
So, like, I was born in Chelmsford, which is it's now a city. It's a large town. It's a large town with a connection of villages around it, maybe like 20 minutes east of Stratford in East London. And it's a fantastic place. Honestly, I love it to bits, apart from when it's awful, which is a lot of the time. But one of the interesting things about it is that Guglielmo Marconi, who was one of the first people to develop radio and the wireless network, he had his factories and did all of his work in Chelmsford. So the birthplace of radio is what Chelmsford is known as.
No way. Again, it's in the bloodstream.
It's in the dirt, do you know what I mean? It's in the soil, it's in the water. The River Chelmer, the River Can, High Street. Yeah, so I love radio. I've always been a, radio in the ear person late night at uni. The first times I was feeling lonely, I'm like, well, I'm just listening to Radio 1, Colin Murray on a late night, or like, I don't know, I was listening to Annie Mac, I listened to like Lauren Laverne, still to this day, I love Lauren Laverne, she's great. And just like, but then I started to diversify my listening. So I was getting like independent radio stations and or places around London, like Represent or like, anything. And I just loved that because it was connection, and you can be with a community, you can be alone together.
Yeah.
And
you can feel like you know someone really personally just because you've listened to like a few episodes with them and stuff like that. Like when I was back home during lockdown, that's when I got really obsessed with podcasts.
Okay, yeah.
Because I was on my own, and it was my way of just feeling some connection with the world still. And I think that's why I just fell in love with the format so much. And ultimately why I came up with this was just for that reason, really, of just wanting to connect with people.
It's a great vehicle for conversation and like, connection in a certain way. There is a thing about like parasocial relationships and how much we feel we know people who are only putting out a certain part of them.
Of course.
And you have to balance with that also this like necessity for authenticity.
Yeah.
And that being like the thing which is super valuable right now in terms of like there is a cultural capital in like authenticness.
Yeah.
So you have to balance these things out.
Yeah.
But it's just about being like a critical consumer of the stuff you take on.
Yeah.
Yes, I love this. Maybe I don't know the entire backstory of this podcast host's life, but in this context, I feel that I know them.
Or you feel safe with them.
Completely.
In your ear.
Yeah, with your time as well.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to waste an hour listening to something I don't want to.
Yeah. It's interesting what you were saying about loneliness, because for me, like having moved to London, it's one of the loneliest cities. Even though there's so many people here. Like that you can feel so isolated even amongst millions of people.
Yeah, I think it's London. It's a thing that people do, especially Londoners do. They love to sit around and talk about London. But as a cipher, as a kind of example of a like capital, metropolitan, financial, cultural, hub.
Yeah.
Is such a great example of so many things that are, just the extremes and wonders of life. Jimi Hendrix living in the same building that Handel lived in, and that's just a museum in London, the Handel and Hendrix Museum. And across like 200 years of difference, two of the most important musicians of their generations and ages. And I could talk about London stories forever, and I do love it, but it is so lonely.
Yeah.
And so many huge cities are...
You just get lost within it, don't you?
You just get lost, And if you haven't got something to hang on to, a community, a regular thing, then, you do just kind of get like... London spits people out. It chews them up and spits them out.
Yeah.
People talk about New York and like Los Angeles, places that you go to, and then you just get like chewed up and spat out. I mean, Paris is another one, especially because like the center of Paris is so markedly different to like half an hour, like outside of Paris, the banlieues and everything.
It is lonely. But I think for me, it's like the spoken word scene has been like the grounding thing for me in London, really.
Yeah, I love it.
It's community, isn't it? It's being held by people and feeling like people care about one another in like a loving and accepting way, really.
Yeah, like at its best, a spoken word night, like any cultural evening or just connection with or grouping of people, anything can be a literal modelling of a different way of doing the world. Do you know? Like we can be different to each other. We can treat each other differently.
Yeah.
We can try to model like a better world in this night. And it's idealistic and it's incredibly, whatever it is, blue sky thinking, new age stuff. But functionally, imagination is radical. And hope is radical right now.
Literally what I was about to say in terms of like your second point of things that make you feel like shit is a hopelessness, but go into these nights and just connecting with people who seem to be in the shit with us is really hopeful.
Yeah, and you can acknowledge each other's legitimate humanity.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much to be like, look, I'm going to listen to this thing for 3 minutes and I'm going to respect this person for saying whatever they said. Within the realms of da-da-da-da-da, as long as they're not hurting anybody and like punching down and being a dick or whatever, you know, you can respect that. And then also you can say at the end of this night, we've been through something and we've witnessed something together. And
we've connected.
Exactly. It's all the spiel that I talk about when I'm hosting poetry nights, because I really do believe it. I've seen poetry nights change lives.
Yeah.
Mine specifically, and so many other people who I now am blessed to consider friends.
Yeah.
And people are young and make mistakes and are stupid and do bad things. And, you know, within all of that, within all of the fucked up, like, shit of how we can be to each other, there was like such beauty in the stuff we were writing, in how we felt, and in the experience of the time. And yeah, like that can be, if it's not a poetry night, it might be your drama group, or it might be the jazz jam you go to, or maybe it's the football club on Tuesday night,
or the flamenco class that you go to,
whatever it is that, like, self-expression, so like arts, crafts, however you get your like fix. Some people bear into the culinary arts. I'm like, yeah, dig it. If cooking's the way, go to like, you know, go to like a cooking class, go to like whatever.
Yeah, hell yeah. Okay, well, in opposition to that then, 3 things that make you feel like the shit.
Okay. Headphones, disco music, sunshine on a like clear day, walking around strutting. That's one.
Stunning. That's right? One. That is one that's umbrella. Yeah, that is a scene. You painted it well. I'm such a sucker for it. Where are you walking in the sunshine? Where do you like to walk? Do you like a park or a canal or?
I'm very like, I was born about 5 minutes away. 5 minutes, well, not even that. Genuinely about 50 seconds walk away from the river that runs through the centre of Chelmsford. So love a body of water.
Oh, love a body of water.
Mate,
there's something about a body of water. Oof.
Like, yeah. When I was in Ghana, I was on a literary residency recently, 2021.
Amazing.
At the Library of Africa and the African Diaspora. Phenomenal place. Highly recommended to anybody listening. And we went down to the coast one night, you know, it's like drinking on a beach bar. And it was the first time I'd like it's the first time I'd touched the water since landing in Ghana.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, this is so special. The moon was so bright, it was reflecting off the ocean and you could see it super bright in the stars. The stars were really bright as well. And it was just one of those like magic moments. So, but going back to the actual moment, it would be like just any like strutting, like any disco, any like funk disco. Imagine me with like maybe Bootsy Collins star glasses. Oh yeah, baby bubba, wind me up. So that's one. What else do we feel like? This is such a stereotypical one for a performer, but when you do a really great show,
fuck yeah,
when you smash a set and like you can feel the audience is like with you,
like in your pocket.
Oh, yeah. It's no better feeling in the world. It's like surfers talk about like being in the tube when they're like surfing. I'm like, it feels like that. You're right in the pocket, right in the groove, right in the moment. So yeah, that's another one. And I've been blessed to have so many great experiences like that, you know, not only through doing poetry for however many years it is now, and that's at open mics and features and in loads of different contexts, music, even in conversations and podcasts when you have the moment where you're like, oh, that was an incredible like thing. Yeah. So yeah, that, and then a third thing that makes me feel like this shit, having the respect of my friends and my like family. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
Feeling like the people whose opinions I respect value me and like understand me. There's no better feeling in the world than feeling like known and loved. Kay Tempest says it. They say to be known and loved, to be known and loved.
Yeah.
Like it's the thing.
To be fully like understood by your friends and your family is a really beautiful thing.
In your wholeness, you know, like, and not having to buff edges or emotionally self-mutilate to appear the right way or do the right thing. No, but to be as much me as I can be and to be loved for that. Yeah. Like, that's, I think, what everyone's kind of striving for. Yeah. And to do it on a planet that isn't polluted, exploding, and run by a vanishingly small amount of the population with incredibly large amounts of power and, you know, weapons. Yeah. Like, it's a... Within all of that malaise of, you know, what bell hooks called white supremacist hetero patriarchy, you can throw in materialism in that as well. Yeah. Within all of that, the quote is poetry, music, art, love. This is what we write for. This is what we live for. Yeah. And, you know, within that, the human experience, value, being known and loved, being understood by a piece of work. Even when you read a poem and you go, oh my God, that is me.
Yeah.
You wrote a poem that I saw you do Tuesday last, as we were recording this, at Versus at the Roundhouse as part of the Last Word Festival. And it was about playlisting and like sending playlists as like a love language. Oh my God. Literally, I'm sitting there being like line for line. This is phenomenal. This is me. I've done this before. You know, I've even thought these little jokes before. B-sides and like, you know, covers. Like,
I think that's like my proudest line in there.
It was a really great poem, honestly. It was a fantastic one to watch. And not only because I was like, I relate, but also because it was performed wonderfully and it was skillfully written, you know.
I think for me, that was one of those moments of the second thing as a performer where you just feel like the energy between. I think because you were in the front row and you were literally like, oh my God.
I made a fool of myself. I did.
But I was like, this feels like the connection. It's the connecting with the audience, isn't it? Like, yeah, I was watching, Kate Blanchett was talking about, like, you know, why she's an actor. And she said, you know, some people say that it's because they want to be a character, or they want to be this, or they want to be this. And she's like, no, I want to like connect and I want to make someone feel something. And yeah, that just resonated. And I think with your poetry as well, like I felt the same. Whilst I was watching you, I just felt so connected with you. And it's a very special thing.
Hey, I'm proud to be able to do what I do, and I'm proud of the work I've done to get to a point where I can do it well.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of every time I give an audience a good experience. Like, I get to hold pride in that. I did that. And obviously with a little help from my friends and everybody else and what it takes to make a person a person. But the Repeat Beat Poet is an invention of me.
Yeah.
And it's something that, you know, something that I've managed to cultivate and create an entire part of my life around. And so when things go well, I'm like, you know what? I'll take that. Nipsey Hussle says it. He says, no excuse for my failures, no apologies for my successes, or words to that effect.
Oh, I love that.
Like, I'm going to take all of my successes and own all of my failures. Yeah. You know, they're all me.
Yeah, yeah. Because it can be so easy to not accept a compliment as well. Because that's like societally Britishness. We're like, no. You know?
Yeah, I like to disavow myself from such ludicrous ways of thinking.
Give me
and
those
being.
compliments. Yeah, amazing. Okay, something that makes you lose your shit in a positive and a negative way.
Oh, in a positive way, like, you know, when the beat drops, you know what I mean? Like, lose your shit. Yeah, like, so I
What's your fave? I was going to ask you this before. What is your fave song to, like, firstly, to do the disco to like, that first, and then secondly, what's your best drop in a song?
Okay, first one, also because it relates to the story I told about feeling like I was the shit in Amsterdam, was sitting in a bar and a song came on called Be Thankful for What You Got by William DeVaughn. Just be thankful of what you got. And the hook, you all know it, is diamond in the back, sunroof down, dig in the scene with a gangster lean, ooh, ooh. So that's probably my favourite song to strut to. But then ask me on a different day, I will give you a different answer.
Fair.
But that song was also a favourite song of my brother's, and he really loved that. And then, you know, so that's another reason. I think I called him when that song was playing. I'm like, I'm literally in a bar and it's playing this song. And I was like, I can't believe this is here. Anyway, so yeah, that's, and then best beat drop. That's so many different types of beat drop. Like, if we're going like filthy liquid drum and bass or something, just like maybe like there's too many, but okay, one I really love is War Pigs by Black Sabbath. Generals gathered in their masses. Just like hard rock, and then the bye-bye.
Wow.
Yeah. Bam, bam, bam. And all of this stuff. So like, I thought that would be like a nice little, I listened to like a lot of like hard, just like proper, rage music. And like, a rage drop is different. Maybe like Break Stuff by Limp Bizkit.
Oh yeah.
Come on, man. Exactly.
It's a classic.
It's all about the he said, she said bullshit, brother. It's just so aggy. it's like when I need to just get that out.
That is two very different sides to you. We've got the disco strut and the grotty drop.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm from Essex. I was born in Essex. For my sins, I was. Don't get me wrong. I'm not from there. Like, my family is from West Africa. I'm from West Africa, but I was born in Essex. And Essex has a great history of, like, dance music.
Yeah.
And a great history of, like, parties and, like, under motorway raves, you know, like, that was a huge cultural thing, not only through, like, the 90s and, like, house and everything. And that's not always been my music taste, but it's always kind of been there.
Yeah.
And so, I love that. And then also, like, you know, funk. There's nothing cooler than funk. Earth, Wind and Fire might be the coolest band ever.
Yes.
Prince might be one of the coolest people ever. Betty Davis. They say I'm different. Betty Davis, hard. And like, so there's that. But you know, there's like different types of like drop. I just love the release of it.
It is
like,
the release, and it's the anticipation, isn't it? You're like, you know it's coming, and then some people go prematurely, and it's an embarrassment for everyone. But when you align, you're like at the same time as the drop. That is a fucking beautiful moment.
Yeah, I super agree. And like, I mean, I don't know about you, but there's moments in a crowd at a festival when you're waiting for that one thing that everybody shouts at the same time, and then it's like 240,000 people all screaming this thing.
Yeah.
Come on.
We're all having a bit of a moment in here at the moment. Okay, and then something that makes you lose your shit in a negative way.
Yeah. Oh, this is gonna be a very embarrassing. When I've got no one else to blame.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like when I know it's my fault. When I know that I've got to hold the L and take it, and I'm just like, because not only do I have to be serious and just be like, you know, like take responsibility, but I also have to be like, okay, and then like, you can't you can't throw this on like anybody else.
No.
You have to take it. Maybe it's because it's part of the loneliness again. It's like, oh, you have to sit with that action.
Yeah.
You know, like you've chosen
You've done
to do
something. It's like shame as well, isn't it? And shame is so fucking powerful.
Indeed, that makes me lose my shit in like a bad way. It triggers the negative self voice of the voice of self-worth.
Yeah.
Because it's not I have made a mistake or I've shown a negative behavior or something that doesn't align with me or how I feel or what I want to be. That very quickly goes to, and I am a bad person.
Well, there's a difference between guilt and shame. Like, guilt is productive and it's like, oh, I shouldn't do that again. I should learn from this. Whereas shame is like, I am a bad person. I did this thing and I'm an idiot. And
that sort of thing, you know.
For sure. A moment you found some shit out about yourself.
I think when the book came out, I'll talk about the book.
This one?
Yes, indeed. Here's one I made earlier.
Hello.
Very blue
There's a little poetry book that you have there.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So this is called A Testament to Life and Death.
Which I have at home, and it's very, very good.
Thank you. I hope you're enjoying it. And I learned a lot about myself when this book was released.
When was that?
February 2022.
Okay, relatively recently.
Yeah, about a year and a half now. I've just released the second edition, which is wonderful to be able to say. But when I released it, it was something like a culmination of a lot of different strands of things, and it was quite literally the stories and the memories and the stories, memories, like prayers, prophecies, dedications across a large period of my life that were also tracking onto obviously what I was thinking about. What was I praying to? What was I dedicating to? Which narratives was I investigating? And I was really proud of that. And the things it showed me about myself is that when I look back across it, I learn how the whole joke is that you learn how you sound to other people when you see yourself on the page, you know?
Yeah.
Reading your work on the page is so phenomenally different from reading it in an audience. Yeah,
because suddenly you are the person who is consuming it as opposed to...
Yeah.
And also once it's printed, there ain't no changing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, apart from the typos that I managed to get rid of in the second edition. Yeah, it's just like there's so... Because you don't have the control of performing it direct to an audience. Yeah. So the performance is literally in the edit and in how you place the words on the page and how...
It's a very different technique, isn't it?
Yeah, and obviously it's like, it's something that... the whole divide between page and stage is an absolute joke because playwrights exist and poets exist and lyricists exist, and so like I don't buy that. But what I do buy is the different formats can do different things.
Yes.
You know, and I think that seeing a collection of my poems written down, I learned stuff about like how I think about and see religion across different poems. That was a theme that came out incredibly quickly once I started writing all the time.
That's
and then I started to write about that, and even things that weren't about religion ended up being about religion. So like I had a poem called Beware the Vicar's Daughter, which was about Theresa May, because she was the daughter of a vicar, right? And even that is actually just a big old list of things to essentially like be wary of within the system of like power. You know, there's lines about like smiling imperialists who are gung-ho on the down low, and like the toffs, their scorn and scoffs surely signal disaster. Like I'm giving warnings.
Yeah.
But even that was through the guise of like a vicar's daughter.
Wow.
And I just kind of didn't realize that until I sort of had written it down. Poems called Desecrated, and I'm like, oh, as in to deconsecrate like a church, to like desecrate something, to desecrate a holy site. And that's a poem about who is invisibilized in London and other major metropolitan cities, migrant workers, dark-skinned people, be it like, you know, domestic work, or be it cleaners is a classic example of how people just are invisibilized. We don't see them.
That's so true.
And that's a poem called Desecrated, but the title is Desecrated. And, you know, it also ends in St. Paul's. That's a very God-heavy one, to be honest. It's a very religion-y one. But I'm also criticising it all the time. I'm writing to it and, like, from it. Do you know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
I'm not sure we've got time, but, like, you know, I have a long storied history in the church, and, like, I left the church. And by long storied history, I mean that it informs everything I do.
Yeah.
And so, what else did I learn about myself? I learned that I really am doing the ting. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, I can see my book in different places. It was when somebody sent me a picture of the book in someone's car on like Peckham High Road or Rye Lane, I forget. But someone just sent me a picture of like someone just reading your book in the car.
That's crazy.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
I had a person who was a teacher in Malmo in Sweden come up to me after a gig in Edinburgh at the Fringe with Loud Poets. And she was like, I love your book. I saw you read a couple of years ago in London. I'm now teaching this book to my like sixth formers, to my year 12s in Sweden. Yeah. And I'm just like, thank you. Yeah. I feel so honoured by that. And it also shows me that regardless of how I feel about myself, I am doing this. I do have my shit together. Yeah. To some extent.
Hell yeah.
You know.
Well, anyone looking at that would assume that you do, you know.
I mean, I got to shout out Spike Zephaniah Stevenson for the artwork, because it's a picture of me that has been edited and then reproduced in this wonderful like glossy style with the Ghanaian flag in the background. So
I love that.
Boom boom.
I think there is something about like having to relinquish control as well, because with the poems that you write, you really are just handing them over to other people for interpretation. Yeah. Because like with performance poetry, you're very much in control of like the intonation of how you say things, or if something's done with like a smile or not. Like you're really just having to alleviate all of that. Yeah,
you got to relinquish control on some level, and that's also a very humbling thing. Yeah, and I think that's
it's naked. Thing. It's like a naked exposing your writing and your brain. Yeah,
completely. You know, and because also I was tend to be way more comfortable in a live performance like setting, personally, how I feel. Yeah. This was a different step, and I felt comfortable-ish. But once it was out there, you go through multiple stages of it being out. First, it's written and it's like locked and it goes like to print. And then you get a physical copy of it in your hand. Oh yeah, then it's real. And then it gets published, or you do a launch, then it's real. But then people actually start reading it and having it in their hands, then it's real. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, maybe a different type of people start reading it in a whole new way, and then it's even more real because it's having its own life. Yeah, you know? And I'm so glad that my book can do that. Like that, it's a part of me. I have a line where I say, basically, I reference the Horcrux. Like I reference Horcruxing something of myself. Yeah. And this book feels a tiny bit
it's like your baby.
That. Yeah, but it's also just my face in it. You know what I mean? Like on the side, big old grin in profile. You know? Yeah, doing my best blue steel. Like,
How long did it take you to get all of the poems together for it?
Maybe like a year, but I was like, I knew that I was going to write a book. I just didn't know what form it was going to take or how it was going to be. I knew I could do something with all the poems I had.
Yeah.
About a year and a bit to pull it together.
Wow. It's very impressive.
Yeah, but the poems are written over maybe 6 years. Yeah.
6 years.
Yeah.
And do you still feel a connection to it now that you're in a different space?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do. And that's not only because I gig relentlessly and sell it all the time and I'm, faced with my face all of the time in books. No, I learn a lot about myself every time that different people interact with the book and a different time I perform and am kind of selling the book. Or I use the book as a framework when I'm performing live because it's easy and it allows people to see a narrative that is in the book. And maybe I, chop and change a couple bits, but I literally, when I'm doing live gigs, I can talk about the context and I can throw in random details about, I don't know, the Anglo-Ashanti Wars of the late 1800s where there was a long protracted, essentially wins and losses between the British and the Ashanti Empire and all of this and how it contextualizes the poems I'm writing about. There's a poem in there called Tommy Built a Cocktail. It's about the rise in mercenaries after the dissolution of the British Imperial Army. Lots of people went off and did private security, or they did literally like counterinsurgency training. And this is, the people who were training, people who were going on mass communist killing raids in places like Indonesia or Central America, Colombia. This is a thing that is known, the CIA cooing people. And also the British deposing Mossadegh in Iran in like the 70s. And the thing about nationalism, I write a lot about nationalism and politics and imperialism and politics. And I can give a lot more context or a different type of context live.
If you're there with it.
Yeah, than in the book. But obviously, it's all there if you read it. Like, I write in a way where you can read these things in the poems. And a lot of the time I write very directly. But a lot of the time I write very airfalutin,
Okay. So, shittest piece of advice you've received?
Oh, the worst piece of advice. I think it would be something along the lines of like, you only have yourself, or like things that feel common sense but are actually quite isolating. So it's things like when you're at school together being like, oh no, you can't talk to each other, you can't help teach each other. And I always thought that was really weird. And I was always like, no, but I learn best through like just like talking out an idea. Philosophy, English, economics,
so
politics, smashed them all, or at least was interested in them. But like when it was difficult and I couldn't understand, my friends were teaching me my GCSE syllabus. Like, thank God they did. And just that isolating thing always felt quite weird to me. And then again, when people say, in the end, you only have yourself. And like all of that's true, but it's
so isolating, really, isn't it?
It hits me the wrong way. Yeah, it's individualistic. And I'm always like, well, yeah, it's kind of true, but also I am because we are. Like I exist in reference to other people as well as myself. Like, and that's always been a comforting thing for me, more so than the knowledge that, like, I know it's only me. Trust me, I know it's only me. There's nothing that people can say about me that I haven't already said to myself, And so when someone goes, at the end, it's just you and your God or whatever. I mean, like, you're not wrong. But in the interim, in life, it's about connections.
Definitely.
And, like, we are what we repeatedly do. Like, that's virtue ethics. That's Aristotle. Like, that's like, who are you? What is the essence of you? And it's also like African communities, like Bantu communities, Hausa communities, like Fulani, Fanti communities, West Africa, historically. I was reading a whole book series called like The General History of Africa, published by like the UN. It's a big old historical tome in like 6 different chapters from like, archaeological prehistory to pre-colony colonialism and whatever. But in it, there's a whole section about how the essence of the person, when the communities were structured in a specific geographic way tied to the African continent, aka if you're just between 2 massive rivers, that's roughly going to be your community. Maybe there's a big hill 20 minutes away and the people on the other side of that huge hill are a different community because, historically they've grown up separately. The people by the coast, maybe they, move along the coast historically. Maybe the people across the desert are more used to that. That's a hell. Maybe they move across there. the similarities in how people interact mean that the kind of like essence of who you are would precede and be your reputation and also your like social like value. It was like who you are, it was how you were known, you know, and that wasn't reserved. So this is about animism, which is the belief that everything is like alive, be that the humanity of a person, the human animal, or if it's the animated life of plants and nature, even reformed, you know, things that we would think of as unalive, like a table or whatever. This used to be a tree. Like, it's in that world of interconnectedness.
And more respectful as well, in a way.
Yeah, it's like, it's the closest thing I can get to a truly holistic, like a truly whole sort of sense of belonging in the world. And so when someone goes, in the end, it's only you, it's very like fatalistic and very individualistic. And those are two things that kind of make me like, maybe not lose my shit, but they make me like despair, you know? So yeah, I think that's my answer. I think that's what I'm going to go for.
I like that.
These are good questions, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just thought how many questions kind of like spread the word shit out into. That's the theme that I was doing. Shit you wish you'd known sooner.
Oh, I wish I'd known that it's okay to try and fail. Do you know what I mean? Like to try and to fail and to learn from your mistakes and to try again. And I still wish I know that, to be honest. I'm still learning that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's some shit I wish I'd known before. I wish I'd known the sheer depths of like how hard the deck is stacked against you if you're a marginalized person, and in what ways it is, and in how those ways intersect as well. Because that, you know, and whatever your protected characteristics are, whatever part of your identity is othered by dominant and mainstream society, whether that's, you know, gender, religion, sexuality, skin color, age, language, you know, whatever it is, there really are like forces and interests that are working against that.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to know the extent of what that means and has meant for history. If you only take into account like 450 years of like European imperialism, white Anglo imperialism, and you see the damage that that's done.
Yeah.
And then you know that no matter how bad we know it is, it's actually worse because of the gaps in our knowledge. Operation Legacy, when the British Empire destroyed its colonial records upon leaving a whole bunch of its former colonial territories, so Kenya and places in the Caribbean, they just junked a whole bunch of records or brought them back to the UK so nobody would ever know. And to this day, no matter how bad we think it is, probably worse.
Yeah,
and I wish I'd known that shit before, because don't get me wrong, I'm a cynic and I have no starry-eyed visions of how great Britain was in the past or how great humanity is in the past. Humans are flawed beings and en masse have done some terrible, terrible things with the excuse of surface level, whatever it is, however you can other someone. If you can do that, then you can have a hierarchy and you can have domination. But because of the way it was industrialized in the past 500 years, that is markedly different from other empires in history. From Rome or from the Aztecs or from...
And so hard to like unpack as well, because it's so entrenched within the way that our society exists now. Which
one of these stones in... pick a European city here, Brussels, Paris, London, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Bristol. What one of these stones hasn't in some way been paid for by the benefits of the slave trade and colonialism? And not only is that history, that's the present, because these companies are the same people. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company rebranded themselves as BP. Like I'm getting a lot of this stuff from Kojo Karam, who's a fantastic... lawyer and also teacher, and he's a historian of British imperial companies. Do you know what I mean? Like, and what that kind of, how that informs capitalism as we see it today. So this is about like racial capitalism. You can't divorce the two. Like, and that, I wish I'd known that stuff earlier in terms of really deep in it. And also when you learn about it, you learn that you have to have alternatives. And this is a thing that like Thatcher famously said, and loads of people say, there is no alternative. And I'm like,
there has to be.
There has to be.
Yeah, because it can't.
Yeah, because it can't go on like this. And also, the alternatives are how we got here. Like, this is the aberration. This is a thing which in the history of human evolution and, you know, society is not normal. And there are books coming out that are reframing the way we think about the story we tell ourselves of history. Great book called The New Dawn of Everything by David Graeber came out a couple of weeks ago. Like David Wengrow and David Graeber, like 800, 900 page, solid 10-hour listen. Great book. I'm about an hour in. But then just ways of reframing society and what is valuable. There's the thing about ecological reframing, indigenous reframing, having different perspectives. A book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer is all about using the scientific knowledge of indigenous communities and putting it in a context that makes sense today and also is functional and explains where we're at. A phenomenal book. It's also about 1,000,000,001 other things. Yeah, but this just comes back to this idea of trying to have a holistic view of the world and a real, radical alternative. Like, because I have to believe there has to be an alternative.
And it goes back to that thing of what you were saying about hope as well. And like, it can feel so overwhelming, particularly when you reflect on like the environment, for example, and how much that is still very much playing into what you're saying, which is like, you know, the minorities are the people suffering, or like the global majority, you know.
Yeah, it's just the further you are from power, the closer your proximity is to essentially, you know, like domination and oppression.
Yeah. Still now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a term called necropolitics, which has been popularized by like this dude Achille Mbembe and Rosie Braidotti, two like theorists and great thinkers, but it's the flip of biopolitics. If biopolitics is a politics of life and who is like, you know, allowed to be and have proximity to the best things in life and like extending life and, you know, be that social reality or wealth, all that stuff. The flip is necropolitics, which is essentially who is positioned in a closer proximity to death and elimination than other people in the hierarchy of society.
Wow.
And so if you think about, just take one example in the UK in the past like 30 years, the PREVENT strategy, which quite literally victimizes Muslim people, and it makes being a Muslim, and also because it's not just about religion, it's also about skin color, it's also about ethnicity, and these things are different. Your skin color is not necessarily your ethnicity. You know, your religion is not necessarily related to your skin color. But it packages all these things up, and it's such a clear and obvious example of victimizing a particular group for a purpose. And that's about like, it's about like border security and like this idea of who we are as a country, and we're not this and we're not that, and we need to other these people to keep whatever this is, in big air quotes, pure and right, and all these myths of purity and oneness and sameness, as if we're not an island, which means that people have been coming and going for all of its history. You know. So like, I suppose that's that.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Okay, so before the podcast as well, I asked you to think of a shit shot. That is a picture that was taken of you that to the outside eye might seem like you had your shit together, when really you didn't.
So I think there's I'm going to have to audio describe the picture.
Set the scene.
Exactly, I'll have to set the scene. So, I recently went up to Newcastle to see an old friend of mine, and he's been a really close friend since secondary school. We played music together in church and in bands and stuff. We made music together, you know, great friend. I felt like my life was falling apart at this point.
Really?
Literally, like, and it was only a couple of months ago. But we took a wonderful picture on one of the many bridges going across the Tyne, and it looks like a really nice picture. You know, like it was freezing, and I was like wrapped up, and he was like just like, you know, a jacket and a scarf, and he looked like it's like a normal day. I look like it's Baltic out there. But yeah, the picture looks nice and like things are going well. But at the time, I was like, you know, felt incredibly isolated, was struggling, didn't really know what was going to happen, didn't really have a solid plan apart from general ideas. Yeah, and that was a really nice picture. I'm glad I have the memory of it as well, because we had a great time, and it did help me feel better, but I, you know, was also feeling bad. So we went to go see David Rodigan.
Sorry.
Love rodders. Yeah.
Did the beat drop?
Oh, there were some crazy times. He would just like drop some like, you know, like nasty dancehall, and he would do this thing where he's just like, "Are you ready to go down the rabbit hole?" And then it would just
Were
be
you
like,
ready?
No, we weren't ready. Then he like,
Can anyone be
points.
ready?
No, and then some big filthy bass.
Wow.
Whatever. There was a new track by Fred again.
Oh, Fred
and-
again.
Yeah, Fred again, and whatever the thing was like Skrillex and like
Yeah.
Flowdan, and he dropped that like 2 months before it came out, and I remember thinking this is like hard.
Yeah.
So it's called like it's like some one syllable word like red or like mad or like something.
And it was mad.
It was. Yeah.
So, PJ, have you got your shit together?
Maybe. Increasingly every day I feel, you know. Do I have my shit together? I do. Like, no matter how adrift I feel, when I lay out kind of what I've done to get to where I am at the current point in my life, I can look at myself and say that 10-year-old me would be proud. And 10-year-old me would say that, nah, this dude's got his shit together.
Yeah.
Like, doing what he loves, being able to earn partially a living from it, being respected in, you know,
Yeah.
for it. If I could dare to say that, maybe some people respect me, I don't know. I'm a
hell
fool,
yeah.
but some people do. And yeah, I just think that 10-year-old me would be proud. And so I say I have my shit together.
And that's who you're doing it for at the end of the day.
Yeah. Exactly, you know. But in my new job, hey, I'm still learning. I've only been in it for a couple of
It's
weeks.
a journey. It's a journey.
Exactly. But thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you
This has
so much
been-
for coming on.